why should companies care about emerging technologies, especially right now in regard to the virus?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, it's kind of interesting if you think about had this hit us even 10 years ago, um, like my ability to work from home, the ability for us to have teleconferences, all of
Hmm.
these things would have been basically impossible. Online
Yeah.
shopping. So I think technology has really, the situation's tough, but has really provided a way for us to try to move forward through the situation.
Hmm.
And you know, you think about, a lot of times when we hit these kind of hard moments, people like to try to maybe go back to what they know. And I think this is a situation in which really we have to be looking to new technology to find new types of solutions for the challenges we have. Because um, I think the director of WID really early on put it really nicely to all the faculty and said, no one has ever in their lifetime experienced anything like this.
Hmm.
This is a really unique event. Um, and I think, in some ways it's really an opportunity to think of new business practices and, how do we reach consumers in new ways. And I think there's certain things that you start to see in which you say, wow, this is actually a pretty good system of ordering things online, having them delivered, having, you drive up, people throw it in the back of your car, and you say, wow, this is actually pretty good.
Hmm.
So I think, you know, while a lot of times, emerging tech seems like it's in the future, I think now is a great time to start trying to invest in it to try to see what new opportunities there might be.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just going off that, what are some key emerging technology trends that companies need to think about this year?
Yeah. And there's always kind of different timelines in terms of when technology is going to hit and how big it's going to hit. I think one that's been really building for a while is all the different machine learning techniques, and a lot of them, and from a academic point of view, a lot of this stuff isn't, has been around a long time, but what we've seen is that, as you start to throw more data and more processing power at a lot of problems, a lot of the machine learning techniques can really start to generate new insights for companies. And I think people still don't know quite where the ceiling is on terms of different AI and machine learning and big data. Um, I think 5G is a really interesting technology that people are still trying to get their heads wrapped around. What can we do with that? I think, currently, at least for me, I'm battling bandwidth issues. I try to work from home. My wife tries to work from home. We're both video conferencing,
Hmm.
you know, so I think 5G, while, you know, in the past might have had, um, you know, you might not have seen why you might need that bandwidth. I think it's starting to become clear that, bandwidth issues are definitely there. And all of a sudden, if you can transfer a lot more data to people's homes, what can you do with that? And I think that's a big, open, unexplored question. Um, I think VR and then particularly AR technology are really, really interesting. I've been really excited. Apple, in their latest generation iPad, actually built in a sensor which is called LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. And this is what's used for self-driving cars. It's used
Mm.
in survey grade equipment for 3D scanning. That's the part I'm really interested in. But all of a sudden, you theoretically have this very, very accurate measurement tool inside of a handheld device. And while Apple's looking at that in terms of, just creating cool AR effects, I think there's all kinds of cool possibilities in terms of measurement, in terms of 3D capture, um, 3D telepresence, maybe. So that's another one I'm just really excited about.
Hmm.
Um, and I think AR technology is something where um, it's been right on the horizon, but the technology hasn't been quite good enough. And potentially with Microsoft's HoloLens 2, and maybe Apple seems to be jumping more and more in this market, that there might be some really cool tech coming out here in the near future.
Awesome. Okay. I know you talked about Apple, but are there any other examples of companies doing those interesting things with tech?
Microsoft created this product called the HoloLens that was probably the first really um, viable see-through AR display. And that's, boy, I don't know how many years ago that was. So they released a second generation model of that. It's very, very difficult to get, but it supposedly fixed a lot of the problems with the previous generation HoloLens. So that's a HoloLens 2. Also, in terms of augmented reality space, Oculus, Oculus Rift usually does virtual reality type of displays, but what they've done in some of their latest generation models is put a lot of cameras on the device, and that way they can try to do what they call inside out tracking and figure out where you're at in space. But they also thought, well, we could try to use these cameras to also show the user the world around them and do things like hand tracking. So this is another kind of area that I think is really interesting in terms of the AR VR space. Is we've had kind of very clunky controller based interfaces, and a lot of applications have looked very much like video games, and you see this huge kind of disparity when you show this to people, that you hand somebody a 3D controller and you can instantaneously tell if they play video games or not. Like people who play video games are moving around doing stuff. We've had people who obviously don't and put the controller on the table and tries to use the joystick like an old arcade cabinet.
Hmm.
So I think those kind of human-based interactions, as we start to get more powerful displays, I think, we can start to do new types of interactions that we couldn't do before. Um, Google, I'm trying to think Google is also, well, another thing Microsoft has done is the Connect Azure, which is really interesting. Um, Facebook, Oculus is part of Facebook, but they've also been throwing lots of interesting work into different types of telepresence. Another one, I'll throw one other one that I've recently seen that I don't know quite what to make of, is Mozilla created these weird things called hubs that are like a 3D virtual environment in which you are an avatar and you can walk around. And for my recent virtual reality conference, we did the conference using this. And so you actually see 3D representations of people. You can walk up to them, you could talk to them. When you're given a presentation, you can see who else is in the room.
Hmm.
Um, and it sounded kind of, I thought it sounded kind of dumb going in, but it actually was kind of cool that you felt like you could interact with people in a much more natural way, where you could go
Yeah.
up and start a conversation with someone.
Hmm.
So it's a really silly one. I think there's a lot of things that we've seen that, pre-COVID, you would say, I don't know if anyone ever used that. And now you're like, man, I'm stuck in my house.
Hmm.
How do I get to try to interact with people in a way I naturally would?